Hello, tonight you will become a Viking, and this is your journey, so let's dive into the story. You stand on the prow of the dragger. The planks beneath your feet creak, soaked with salt water and the sweat of dozens of campaigns. A cold wind strikes your face, burning the skin, slipping beneath your fur cloak. Dark sea waves heave and fall heavily, as if testing you for strength. You hold onto the carved prow, the head of a beast that looks forward, just as you do ahead, foreign shores. You do not yet see them clearly, only a dark line on the horizon. But you know, there is gold there is glory, and there is death. Behind you are dozens like you. Some remain silent, gripping their weapons. Others whisper prayers to Odin, asking for wisdom and luck. Others recall Thor, hoping for strength in battle. You feel your heart beating faster. This is not your first voyage, but fear does not disappear. It only becomes quieter, deeper. You have learned to live with it, learned to turn it into rage, into resolve, into cold calculation. You are a Viking, but you were not born a warrior. Once you were a child, weak, crying, dependent on the will of others. You took your first breath in the cold lands of Norway, where life itself is a struggle. There was no place for weakness. There, every day is a trial. You remember the smoke of the longhouse, the smell of wood and livestock, the warmth of the hearth. You remember how you first held a piece of wood, imagining it was a sword. How you listened to stories of gods, heroes, and battles where men became legends, or died, leaving nothing behind. You grew up watching, learning in silence, working when you wanted to play, enduring when it hurt, because there was no other way, and one day they gave you a weapon. It was heavy, unfamiliar, but in that moment you understood. There was no way back. The world no longer divided into childhood and games. Now it was divided into those who survive and those who vanish. You remember your first battle, the worst. Screams, blood, chaos. Your hands trembled, your breath broke. You did not feel like a hero. You were simply trying not to die, but you survived, and with each raid, you became different, harder, faster, colder. You learned to look death in the eyes and not look away, and now you are here again, on the prow of the dragger. Between past and future, between life and death, the shore is getting closer. Soon, it will begin again. You are born in the harsh lands of Norway, where cold seeps into the bones and the wind knows no mercy. Your first cry is swallowed by the crackling fire and the howling winter storm outside the walls of the longhouse. Here, life does not begin in peace. It begins in struggle. You do not yet know it, but the very fact that you take your first breath is already a victory. Many children do not survive their first winters. Disease, cold, hunger, all of it arrives without warning. The weak are not pitied here. The world is not cruel, it is simply indifferent. And if you want to remain in it, you must become stronger. You are wrapped in furs and brought to the fire. Women speak quietly, appraisingly. Men watch in silence. They have seen too much to celebrate too early. But you breathe, you cry, you endure. That means you have a chance. Several days pass. The moment comes when you are given a name. It is not just a sound, it is part of your fate. It is believed that a name can determine who you become. A warrior, a sailor, a trader, or someone who will be forgotten The eldest of the clan lifts you in his arms. There is no tenderness in his gaze, only evaluation. He does not ask who you want to be. He decides who you must become. The name is spoken, and with it a plea to the gods, to Odin, to grant you wisdom, cunning, and the ability to survive where others fall, to Thor, to give you strength, so that your hand does not tremble in battle. You understand nothing yet, but prayers are already being made for you. Decisions are already being formed. Expectations already exist. Your life begins not with choice, but with expectation. The first years pass in smoke and half-light inside the longhouse. You grow among people, animals, and constant movement. There is no solitude here, no silence. Everything happens close by: work, conversation, arguments, laughter, and death. You sleep beside others. Eat what they eat. From the very beginning, you are part of something larger than yourself. You learn to observe before you learn to speak. At first, you simply watch. Adults chopping wood, repairing tools, preparing food. You see that everyone has a task. There are no unnecessary people. Everyone must be useful, and one day so must you. At first, simple things. Handing things, carrying, cleaning. You do it clumsily, slowly. You make mistakes. No one praises you, but no one stops you either. Because here, learning does not happen through words, but through repetition and pain. You take an axe for the first time, too heavy for you. Your hands shake, your fingers slip. The strike is weak. The wood does not yield. You become angry, try again and again, until one day it works. It is a small victory, but no one speaks of it. You simply move on to the next task. That is how your childhood passes. You help with chores, carry water, tend livestock, clean, repair, haul. At times it feels endless, but this is how you become part of this world. You begin to understand. Survival is not an act of heroism. It is a habit. In the evenings, everything changes. The fire burns brighter. Work ends. People gather closer. And then the stories begin. You listen at first, simply because they are interesting. Later, because you begin to understand them, you are told about the gods, about Odin giving up an eye for knowledge, how he hung from the tree to uncover the secrets of the world. This is not a story of victory, it is a story of cost. You are told about Thor, who fights giants, about his strength, his hammer, how he protects the world of men. You hear about heroes, those who sailed across the sea and returned with wealth, or never returned at all, those whose names are remembered, and those who are forgotten. You begin to understand what glory is. It is not simply respect. It is a way to remain after death, but childhood is not only learning, it is also the first trials. You fall. You cut yourself. You freeze. Sometimes you go hungry. Sometimes you are afraid. And each time you face a choice, stop or continue. No one will do it for you. Gradually, fear changes. It does not disappear, but it becomes different. It stops being something that haunts you and becomes something that warns you. You learn to feel the limit, and sometimes to cross it. You look at adults differently. They once seemed unshakable. Now you begin to notice. They tire. They make mistakes. Sometimes they fail, but they continue, and you understand. Strength is not never falling. Strength is standing up again. Years pass. You grow taller, stronger, faster. Work that once seemed impossible becomes automatic. The axe no longer feels heavy. The cold no longer paralyzes you. You adapt, but alongside this comes a new feeling. You begin to realize this world is larger than the longhouse and the nearby lands. You hear of raids, of distant shores, of wealth that can be taken by force or by cunning, and a desire appears inside. You, not just to survive, but to prove you can be more. One day you catch yourself thinking you are no longer a child, but you are not yet an adult either. You are somewhere in between, and that is the most dangerous place, because ahead lies a choice, to stay or to leave, to become someone who lives and dies on this land, or someone who goes beyond it. You do not yet know which path you will take, but one thing is already clear: the world you were born into will not give you an easy life, and it will not forgive weakness. Adolescence does not arrive abruptly. It does not announce itself with words. It arrives through demands that begin to be placed on you. One day, you are no longer given simple tasks. You are given a weapon. It happens without ceremony, without ritual. Simply at some point an axe is placed in your hands. Not a toy, not a carved piece of wood, but a real weapon. Heavy, cold, with a sharpened edge that does not forgive mistakes. You feel its weight. At first, it feels too large for you. Your fingers close around it unevenly, your grip uncertain. You lift it and immediately understand this is not a tool for work. It is a tool for survival. The first strike is clumsy, the second slightly better, the third already deliberate. You are not taught through words. You are taught through repetition, through exhaustion, through mistakes that echo painfully in your arms and shoulders. You learn to fight with an axe, not beautifully, not like in stories, but the way it is in reality. Fast, rough, without unnecessary motion. You are taught to strike so the opponent does not rise again, to avoid exposing yourself, to keep balance, to not hesitate. You understand, in battle, there is no second chance. Sometimes training takes place on wooden targets, sometimes against one another. The strikes become harsher, bruises deepen. You are hit on the arms, shoulders, sometimes the head. No one stops it, because it is better to be struck here than there, where it would be the last time. But the weapon is only part of it. You learn to hold formation. You were alone before. Now you are part of a line, part of a shield wall. Your mistake is no longer only your own problem. It becomes a risk for everyone standing beside you. For the first time, you stand shoulder to shoulder with others. At first, it feels unnatural. You feel another's breath, hear someone tightening their shield. The creak of wood under pressure. You are trained to move as one step, another step, stop, raise the shield, strike. Again, again. You understand that strength is not only within you, it is in those beside you, but only if you do not fail them. If you falter, the line breaks, and when the line breaks, chaos begins, and chaos is death. The third trial comes with water. You are placed in a drakkar. You once saw it from the shore. Now you are inside it, among others, with an oar in your hands. At first, it seems simple. You lower the oar into the water, pull, repeat, but time passes, and everything changes. Your arms begin to burn. Your shoulders ache. Your back tightens as if it might snap. Your breathing breaks rhythm, but no one stops, and neither can you, because if you stop, the burden falls on others, and that means you become the weak link. The rhythm is set by the elder, a low voice, the strike of oars against water. Again, hours stretch on. The water feels endless, the shore distant. You think you will not endure it, but you continue, because there is no alternative, and at some point, something shifts. The pain does not disappear, but you stop focusing on it. It becomes background, something constant you begin to work through. That is how you learn the essential thing. Not strength, not technique, but endurance, the ability to continue when the body already says no. With each day, the demands increase. More is expected of you. Are no longer a child whose mistakes can be forgiven. Now a mistake is weakness, and weakness here is not excused. It is removed, or it removes you. You begin to notice changes in yourself. Your body becomes harder, your movements more precise, your reactions faster, but more importantly, your thinking changes. You begin to anticipate consequences, to recognize danger, to sense when to strike and when to withdraw. You become more attentive, harder, colder. Sometimes you return home after training. You sit by the fire. Look at your hands, calloused, cut, bruised. Before, you would have complained. Now, you do not, because you understand this is the price of one day surviving. You hear more and more talk of voyages, of distant lands, of battles where destinies are decided, and you understand. Everything you are doing now is not without purpose. It is preparation for what is inevitable. And one day you catch yourself on a simple thought. If before you feared pain, now you fear becoming weak, because the weak do not survive here, not at sea, not in battle, not in this life, and you accept it, not as a threat, but as a rule that cannot be broken. You set foot on the Drakkar for the first time, not as an observer, but as a participant. The wood beneath your feet feels alive. The ship rocks slightly even at the shore, as if it already senses the sea. Around you are men you have known all your life, but now they are different, silent, focused, without unnecessary words. You take your place. You are given an no. One asks if you are ready. The Drakkar pushes off from the shore. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the land you have always known begins to recede. First by a few steps, then by dozens. Then it becomes a line. You do not disembark. Now, it is no longer possible. Days at sea pass differently. There is no familiar rhythm, no shelter, only water, wind, and constant motion. You row. You sleep in fragments. You eat without tasting anything, and you think. Sometimes you look at the others, those who have already been on raids. They are calm, almost indifferent. For them, this is work. For you, it is not. For the first time, you are going somewhere where you may be killed. Finally, the shore appears. England. At first, like a shadow. Then, like land, you see green fields, buildings, smoke. This is not your home, not your land. That is exactly why you are here. Your heart begins to beat faster. That is not just fear. It is a mixture. Fear, because you do not know what will happen. Excitement, because you want to prove you are capable. You grip your weapon tighter. Your fingers no longer tremble as they once did. But inside, everything is stretched to its limit. The landing happens quickly. The ship hits the shore. Shouts. You jump into the cold water, feel it immediately cut through your clothes. But you do not stop. You run forward. Everything happens too fast to think. You simply follow the others. The first raid. You imagined it differently. In stories. It looked like glory. In reality. It is chaos. Fire. Someone is running. Someone is falling. Someone is trying to resist. You hear sounds that cannot be mistaken. Blows, cracking wood, gasping breaths. The smell of smoke and blood mixes in the air. You pause for a moment. That moment is the most dangerous. Because in it, you can still turn back, but you do not. You step forward. Then another step. And another. You raise your weapon. The first strike is not like in training. It is not controlled. It is sharp, brutal, almost desperate. You are not thinking about technique. You are thinking only of one thing. Survival. Time loses shape. You do not know how long it lasts. Minutes or hours. You move. Strike. Defend. Strike again. Sometimes you do not even know who is in front of you. Friend. Enemy. It no longer matters. Only one thing matters. You are still standing. When it ends, silence arrives. Not complete, but different. No shouting. No movement. You breathe heavily. Your hands tremble, but no longer from fear. From strain. From the fact that it is over. And you are still here. You look around and you understand you are no longer who you were. The journey home feels different. You already know what a raid is. You know what battle sounds like. You know what death looks like, not in stories, but up close. And it stays with you, not as a memory. As a part of you. Now, your life is divided into two worlds. The world of home. And the world of the raid. At home. Everything feels slower. Quieter. Clearer. You work the land again. The hands that held weapons now hold tools. You cut wood, build, repair. You take part in a life not defined by battle. Sometimes it feels strange. As if it is another reality. But you know, without it, there is no return. Because here you recover. Here you become a man again, not only a warrior. You build a house, a fence, place of your own. You begin to understand the value of what once seemed ordinary. Warmth. Food. Silence. But it does not last long. There is always a moment when the call returns. People gather again. The drakkar is prepared again. And you go, because now it is part of you. And raids. You are no longer a novice. You know how to move, how to hold. Formation. When to attack. When to withdraw. You begin to see the mistakes of others. And try not to repeat them. But a raid is not only battle. You learn to plunder. Quickly. Efficiently. Without unnecessary noise. You understand that it is not only about taking, but about keeping. You learn to find what is valuable. To ignore what is not. To act without hesitation. Sometimes it is not a raid. Sometimes it is trade. You stand on the shore, but not with a weapon in your hand, but with goods, silver, fabrics, objects. You exchange. You look into the eyes of people who yesterday might have been your enemies, and you understand. The world is more complex than it seemed. Not everything is decided by force, sometimes by advantage. But even then, you do not relax because danger has not disappeared, but it only changed form. You learn to survive, not only in battle, but everywhere. At sea, on foreign land. Among strangers, in situations where a mistake costs life. Over the years, it becomes habit. You stop dividing the world into safe and dangerous. It all becomes dangerous, and you simply learn to exist in it. You notice how others change. Some do not return. Some break. Some become harder than necessary. You observe this and understand. The main thing is not just to survive. The main thing is not to lose yourself completely. But that is difficult, because every battle leaves a mark. Every raid changes you, quietly, gradually. And one day you realize you no longer think about the first fear. It is gone. In its place. Experience. Cold. Precise. Practical. You no longer ask yourself whether you are ready, because you already know the answer. You have no choice. You are already inside this life, and there is no way out. You are a warrior. But not only that, you are someone who knows how to live between worlds, between fire and silence, between destruction and creation. Between death and life. And that is what you have become. The bloom of greatness does not come suddenly. It accumulates, at first through survival, then through experience, and one day you notice people begin to treat you differently. Your name is no longer spoken. Casually, it is known. It is remembered. It is taken into account when a Drakkar is assembled. You are no longer placed at the back. You take your place among those who have already proven they can not only go forward, but also return. People listen to you. Sometimes they ask, sometimes they simply watch, waiting to see what you will do. Respect here is not given in words. It is built from actions you have already taken and mistakes you manage to avoid. You no longer act blindly. You see the field before you step onto it. You notice weak points. You sense danger even when it is not yet visible. Your movements become more economical. You do not waste strength. You do not take unnecessary risks. You begin to understand. It is not the strongest who survives, but the most precise. Alongside this comes another part of life, family. It is not a sudden turn. It is a gradual decision that becomes obvious. You are no longer just a warrior who comes and goes. You now have a place you return to for more than rest. You are awaited. The home fills with voices, warmth, a presence that cannot be replaced by loot or glory. You begin to build not only walls, you build continuation of yourself. Responsibility changes. Now you risk not only your own life, and that forces you to think differently. You still work the land as before, but now you see meaning in it that you did not see earlier. Every effort is no longer just survival. It is investment in those who will remain after you, but you do not stay at home. The bloom is not a stop, it is an expansion. You travel farther than ever before, not because you must, but because you can. Your paths lead to the shores of France. Everything is different here. The land is more densely populated. Cities larger, defenses more organized. Here surprise is no longer always enough. Here you must think you see fortifications that cannot be taken by a simple rush. You see people who know how to defend themselves. You understand the world is not limited to easy targets. Here, you must choose when to attack, when to withdraw, when to negotiate. You learn flexibility, and it changes you more than any battle. But further, still lie other routes. You move east, where rivers become roads, where the world looks different. Kievan Rus, you travel not only by sea, but by land and water at once, through forests, through rivers, through territories where language sounds different and rules are different. You see trade routes, you see how the meaning of a raid changes. Here, it is not about destruction, but negotiation, not about taking, but exchanging. You stand among people who are not like you, and you understand. The world is far wider than you once believed. You begin to notice differences. How houses are built, how affairs are conducted, how strength and words are treated, and this knowledge becomes your advantage. You are no longer just a warrior, you are one who understands. With each new journey, your map of the world expands. What once seemed distant becomes accessible. What once seemed foreign becomes familiar. You stop thinking in the limits of a single land. You begin to see connections, routes, possibilities, and alongside this comes a new feeling, not fear, not excitement, but awareness of scale. You realize that most people will never see what you have seen. They will remain where they were born. They will live and die without knowing what lies beyond the horizon. But you know, this does not make you better, but it makes you different. You return home after another journey. You sit by the fire. You look at the people around. You understand. There is more inside you now than before. More experience, more memory, more understanding, but also more weight, because everything you have seen remains with you. The bloom is not only strength and respect, it is the moment when you reach the peak of what you can be, when you are capable of acting, understanding, and choosing, when you see not only the step, but its consequences, and at that moment you understand more clearly than ever. None of this will last forever, but while it does, you use it to the end. Faith does not come to you as a choice. It has always been there. From childhood, you heard the names of the gods. You listened to stories in which the world is held not only by the strength of men, but by the will of those who stand above. Back then, they were just words, images, tales by the fire. Now it is part of your reality. You make offerings to Odin, not because it is customary, but because you understand the price. He is not a god of simple requests. He does not give freely. Everything tied to him demands payment. Wisdom through laws, victory through risk, knowledge through pain. You stand before the altar in your hands, an offering. You do not ask for an easy Life, you ask for something else, the ability to see further, to understand, more to survive where others cannot. And you know, if he hears you, there will be a cost, but you are ready because you already live in a world where it is necessary. To Thor, you speak differently, without complex words, without hidden meaning. You ask for strength, directly, harshly, like him, before a voyage, before battle, before the moment where everything is decided in seconds. You think of him, of his hammer, of his strikes that leave no second chance. You do not hope he will save you. You ask that your hand does not falter, that your strike is precise, that you are stronger at the moment it matters, but over time you begin to understand. Faith is not only about asking, it is about acceptance. You believe your fate is already set, not in detail, but in essence. No matter how much you plan, calculate, or strive, there are things you do not control. You have seen it too many times. The strong have fallen, the weak have survived, the experienced have made mistakes, the inexperienced have returned, and you understand there is a thread you cannot see, but it exists. This does not make you passive. On the contrary, it makes you more precise. You do everything that depends on you. You train, you think, you choose, but deep down you understand the outcome is not always in your hands, and this strangely brings calm, not complete. Sufficient. You stop wasting strength on trying to control everything. You focus on what you can do here, now, before battle. This becomes especially clear. You stand in formation, shield beside shield, breath steady, In a moment, it will begin, and in that moment, there is no time for doubt. You have already done what you can. The rest is not yours. You no longer fear death as you once did, not because you have become fearless, but because you understand it differently. If you fall in battle, it is not an end. It is a transition. You believe in Valhalla, not as a story, but as continuation, a place where warriors worthy of their fate continue to exist, where battle does not end in defeat, where death is not failure, but proof. It is not comfort, it is orientation, but it is not enough simply to die. It matters how to fall while retreating, or to stand until the end, to surrender, or to strike once more. Even if it is the last, you know that this is what matters. And so, when the moment comes, you do not retreat, not because you are unafraid, but because you have already accepted the outcome, any of them. Faith does not make you weaker. It removes what is unnecessary. Doubt, hesitation, paralyzing, fear, leaving only what is required. Action. You continue to live, to fight, to choose. But inside you now there is a support you did not have before, an understanding that you are part of something larger, something that does not end with a single day or a single life. And when you raise your weapon again, you do it not only for yourself, but for the path that is already set and which you will walk to the end. Aging does not arrive at once. At first, it is almost imperceptible. You still go to sea, still hold your weapon, still stand in formation. But one day you catch yourself on a simple thought. You have become slower, not much, but enough to feel it. You are no longer as fast or as strong as before. Your hand still remembers the motion. Your body still knows what to do. But now, every action carries an effort that was not there before. Fatigue comes sooner. Recovery takes longer. You notice it not in yourself, but in others. The younger warriors move differently. Sharper, lighter. They go forward without hesitation, just as you once did, and you understand you are no longer at the front, but you are not behind either. You are somewhere else. Now you are seen differently, not as an equal, but as a mentor. The young come to you with questions, sometimes with doubts they try to hide. They want to know how to act, how to survive, how to avoid the mistakes that could cost them their lives. You do not tell stories for effect. You speak briefly, precisely, because you know there is no time for long explanations in battle. You teach them what you learned too late. Where not to rush. Where not to take risks. When to withdraw, when to strike. You see yourself in them, but without experience, and that makes them dangerous, first of all, to themselves. You cannot live their path for them, but you can shorten it. If they listen, you go on raids, less often. Not because you do not want to, but because you choose to. Before, you went almost always. Now only when it is truly necessary, when your experience matters more than strength, when your presence can change the outcome. Staying at home becomes more familiar, but not easier, because part of you is still there, on the water, in motion, in the tension before battle. You sit by the fire, you listen, you observe, and you understand the world does not stand still. It changes. Gradually. But inevitably, new beliefs appear. People begin to speak of another God. Not of strength and battle, but of forgiveness. Of humility. Of an afterlife not defined by how you died. You listen and do not rush to accept. The old gods, Odin, Thor, are still with you. You grew up with them, with their stories, with their laws, but you see them losing influence around you. Not instantly. Not everywhere, but it is happening. The young already think differently. Some of them believe in new words. New promises. And you understand, the world that formed you is fading. This does not anger you. It brings understanding, because you have already seen how everything changes, how new lands become familiar. How the foreign becomes ordinary. Now, it is not space that changes. It is meaning. You remain in between old and new. You remember how it was, but you see how it becomes, and you do not try to stop it, because you know there are things that cannot be held. With age comes another sensation. Silence. Not external. Internal. You speak less. Think more. Remember, more. Not with regret, but with clarity. You see your life as a chain of decisions, some correct, some not, but all of them brought you here. And one day you begin to feel time is nearing its end. Not through fear. Through understanding. The body is no longer the same. Strength is leaving. The rhythm of life slows, and you accept it. As you have accepted everything else. You do not try to hold on to the past, because you know it is impossible. You look at those who will remain. At your family. At your students. At those who will continue. and you understand. Your part is already complete. The final journey does not announce itself, but you feel it, approaching dot in each day, dot in each movement. It may come in different ways. Perhaps you will once again find yourself in battle, not because you must, because you choose to. One last time, you stand in formation, not the fastest, not the strongest, but the most experienced, you know it may be the end. And you do not retreat, because you have never retreated. If it happens, you will accept it, as you have accepted everything else, or it will end differently, quieter, you will be at home, among those you know, among voices that have become part of you, without shouting, without a weapon in your hands, simply in the moment, when the body says, enough, both paths are equal, because what matters is not only the end, but how you lived. Afterward, only one thing remains, memory, and ritual. You are buried according to tradition, with your weapon, because you were a warrior. Even if you did not die in battle, it is part of you, it cannot be separated. You are sent off with honor, not through words, but through presence, through people coming, looking, silently remembering. You depart not as someone who merely lived, but as one who completed a path from beginning to end, without return, without avoidance. And in this completion, not loud, but whole, you are a child who learned to survive. You became a warrior who learned to prevail. You lived long enough to understand the cost of both. And now only one thing remains, the trace you leave behind.